everyone. I'm Dr. Marianne Mercer. Welcome to my Positive Life Answers podcast. I am your podcast host and self-improvement expert, Dr. Marianne Mercer, and you can call me Dr. Mary. Welcome to episode 15, Bouncing Back from Difficult Times. In my Positive Life Answers podcast, my goal is to help you transform the quality of your life and help you create the life you desire. Remember, the goal of this podcast is to help you make improvements and changes in practical and empowering ways. Let's create your best life ever. If you're new to my podcast or just discovered this podcast, welcome. I'm so glad you found me. Now, don't forget to press that follow button in your podcast app so that you don't miss out on future episodes. And a big thank you to those who are continuing to follow me on this journey. Now, today I would like to talk about a question and a request for a topic from one of my listeners. Actually, this was kind of a repeated question over the last few weeks. These are great tips on optimism, resilience, problem solving, creating your best life ever. How do you bounce back from difficult times, especially when the world seems to be so troubled these days? So that's what developed this podcast called Bouncing Back from Difficult Time episode. This episode is named after my recent book, which I wrote, called Bouncing Back from Difficult Times. There are many reasons I felt that I needed to write my recent book, both professionally and personally. You know, after many years of helping people in my work as a psychologist, researcher, book author, speaker, and intensive life coach and co-creator, I found common threads over the years regarding difficult times people experience, as long as what really worked for them. Well, personally, I'm human too, right? I hit bumps in the road and difficulties that became wonderful learning experiences for me. As a result of both perspective as a helping professional and my own experiences, I discovered what works and what does not. When I bounced back from my own difficulties, I thought that all people were capable of achieving this in their lives. However, I learned there was a lot more. What I originally viewed as challenges in my life became unique opportunities to venture into higher ground of growth that goes well beyond the concept of chasing happiness. You talk and you might listen to people professionally or friends talk about they just want to be happy and they keep chasing happiness. That's not going to be a long-lasting feeling that you'll have. So instead of chasing happiness like a lot of people do, which is a state that doesn't really last long and is kind of fleeting, I'm teaching you via this podcast, in these episodes and today, how to make lasting changes in your life. I'm going to share with you from both sides of the aisle, meaning as a psychologist, plus along with my own experiences and seeing what works and what does not work for everyone. You know, in the last few years, we've all been hit with other difficult times that the whole world had been experiencing together. The unique challenge of the world pandemic took difficult times to a new level that we've never seen and never experienced in our modern lives. My work with clients and peers remotely and online during that time, in the midst of the challenges we faced during that time, revealed to me it was a wake-up call. And it was a wake-up call for most people regarding their lives. Probably are wondering, Dr. Mary, why was it a wake-up call? What I discovered, because we are always on the go, to seldom take time to pause to evaluate our lives. When we find ourselves feeling unsettled and unhappy, we just stay stuck in high gear and hope it goes away. We just keep running and running and running. Being in lockdown, physically as well as emotionally, we could not escape from our thoughts and feelings, and we really were forced in a way to face them. Whether we liked it or not, it was staring at us in our face. Our thoughts, our feelings, our accomplishments, or not, was staring at us in our face, and we could not run for them, which is why many people developed anxiety and depression during that time. Well, I noticed recently that people really haven't shook off those experiences over the last few years. And it was a result of working and speaking with people from all of the U.S. as well as other parts of the world during and after the pandemic. It reveals a sense of connectedness and commonalities in dealing with these difficulties and uncertainty. The sense of uncertainty about the future really played havoc on everyone, and still does at this time in our lives. You know, during and after the pandemic and lockdown, while a lot of people struggled, I noticed there were a lot of people who flourished. You're probably saying, really, Dr. Mary? And I'm like, yes. Why was that? In discovering these patterns, it inspired me to write my book, Bouncing Back from Difficult Times, and led me to create this podcast back in January. From my experiences as a psychologist for many years, and many years as a book author and speaker, As well as my own experience in these recent years, it inspired me to reach out to all those who are still suffering because of the recent pandemic or other problems in their lives, as well as a variety of other difficulties people are facing in their lives right now or even in the near future. My recent book and this podcast is for everyone who has ever experienced difficulties and difficult times in their life. And this podcast and my book is there for anyone who wants to improve and make changes in their lives. Now in my book and today in our discussion today, I'm going to cover some key lessons, which include reasons why some people can't cope with difficulties while others rise above it and come out of it better, how some people survive and thrive during difficult times while others suffer, and ways you can overcome those difficult times or steps you can take to rebound and rise above your challenges. I shared my story with you many podcasts ago called The Victoria Story. If you haven't listened to that, please go to the Optimism Habits Made Easy earlier podcast episode and listen to my Victoria Story. I shared with you my Victoria Story, my story of how I overcame challenges in many different times in my life. And if you haven't heard my Victoria Story, please go to the earlier episode I created called Optimism Habits Made Easy, so you can get a sense of that as we move on, right? Defeating thoughts and habits kind of keep you down. So defeating thoughts and habits include complaining, of course, blaming, and dwelling on problems. These harmful habits and thought patterns make it easy to get stuck, and it makes it difficult to cope during difficult times. These patterns, these self-defeating thoughts and reactions keep you stuck, and emotions such as anger, worry, fears, and blaming others just anchors you down even more. When you hold on to feelings like that, they further anchor you down, making it difficult to rise above your problems. They contribute to self-defeating thoughts, habits, and behaviors that keep you from rising above and overcoming your problems. Some people, on the other hand, believe that difficult times serve a purpose if we just take the time, take a pause to learn from them and stories we developed about them. Troubled times, disappointments, pain can help you learn and grow if we welcome them into our life. And that sounds weird, but if you just welcome them into your awareness to learn from them. Difficult times teach us lessons, they guide us and help us learn valuable lessons that can only be taught to us during the time of crisis or in that matter. I notice a lot of people, they go to webinars and seminars when they're feeling desperate. You can use that time not to feel desperate, but to learn. So keep on listening. Now you will learn about thoughts and emotional reactions that keep you from handling life difficulties and problems. Just a note, an interesting note, as a psychologist, I am part of the American Psychological Association and one of their media experts that gives commentary to different media outlets. So even before the pandemic hit, the U.S. was ranked number 19 in the World Happiness Report, according to the American Psychological Association. I think there are a few reasons why the ranking is so low, despite all the opportunities we have available to us in the U.S. I believe that in the U.S. and now in other countries, we have not balanced our lives and also have become isolated in our digital age. Overworked schedules and time at home in which we are not connecting to each other, because spending times on computers, phones, and games has created a lot of problems for us, a lot of problems for family and children even. Working from home in a sense of isolation, I believe, really has contributed to the problem of recent times that people still feel stuck in. And again, my goal today is to move you ahead, shake off the last few years, and get moving ahead in your lives. But remember, if you're isolated and you lost your support system, namely contact with people, we have less downtime and connection outside or in nature, and we really need to get up on that. This sense of burnout and unhappiness includes a lack of social support, or even if you're not isolated and connected to people who drain you, that can really hold you back. Taking on more than you can handle at home, work, school, along with poor self-care is a major culprit that I've discovered in working with hundreds and thousands of people over the years. My recent book, which you can find on my website, Bouncing Back from Difficult Times, I also research people who bounce back from troubled times and difficulties in their lives. These people not only get up on their feet, but also make amazing improvements in their lives. They are hardy and resilient people. Remember, you can order a copy of my book directly from me at positivelifeanswers.com. If you go to positivelifeanswers.com and go to our online store, you'll find the books. Let me share with you some examples that I have found in my work over the years with people and the causes of unhappiness, frustration, and burnout that prevents you from bouncing back from difficult times and other life difficulties and problems you face in your life. Here are some reasons. One, a big one, feeling a lack of control over your life. Psychological research, and my research as a psychologist, suggests that there's a link between a lack of control and unhappiness and burnout. Overall, a locus of control can be internal inside you or external outside of you. This is in a manner in which you view your life circumstances, very simply. Another fancy words, but remember, internal locus control means that you as a person perceives that you are in control of your life and what happens in your life. They believe that their attitudes and behavior create what they have in their life. Those people with an external locus control, meaning outside of themselves, means that an individual attributes what happens to them to an external or outside force they cannot control nor do anything about. And I know what you're thinking. I know lockdown during a pandemic and a slow return to our lives was something outside of control. Outside of our control, I should say. This is one reason why it was so stressful and depressing for many people. However, if this is the way you usually look at life outside of the pandemic, it can be problematic for you. External locus of control folks believe their lives are mainly controlled by random events and random actions of other people or circumstances. As a result, they end up feeling helpless and defeated. And eventually, if you keep living this way, you're just going to become a burned out and angry person. And you'll tend to worry all the time. Remember, worry is the number one happiness and energy zapper. And worry leads to feeling defeated and burned out. As you probably can guess from what I'm saying, an internal locus control is tied to greater resilience and strength. These individuals feel in control of their lives and exhibit a can-do attitude, just like optimistic people. Another reason, number two, feeling lack of control over your job or work, plus lack of work-life balance. This includes many factors such as heavy and demanding workloads. In other words, trying to juggle heavy workloads is one of the prime causes of unhappiness and burnout. People reported feeling burned out due to too many things such as too much overtime or after-hour work demands. This problem became worse with the work-at-home changes and the hybrid schedules as we experienced before, during, and after the pandemic. Even now, the lines of work and home are really blurry for most people. For many, controls look like the ability to affect workplace placements and decisions. It also includes the ability to access essential job-related resources. It has been found that employees with more, what I call, quote, perceived control, end quote, are more likely to be engaged and to become motivated in their work. In my last episode, we talked to HR and management expert Dr. Michael Mercer regarding creating a happy and upbeat and supportive workplace. So if you haven't listened to that, give it a listen to episode 14. It'll be quite eye-opening for you. Another reason I wanted to address here, number three, is a lack of self-care. The lack of a well-rounded self-care routine is a key to lack of joy and stressing out. Self-care is an important way to protect yourself from ongoing stresses, unhappiness, and difficult times. Most people I work with claim they have no time or are so busy they have no real downtime. And I think the word "I'm so busy" is just an excuse these days. It's quite overwhelming to hear that being repeated as people's mantras these days. When people repeat to themselves over and over they're too busy, they will feel time bankrupt. Here's where the vicious cycle of not making time for yourself and chronic stress leads to burnout and other problems if not stopped. I've talked with many moms and parents who keep pushing themselves to the point that they are running on empty and they start experiencing physical problems. Let me ask you, is your daily to-do list too long? Overscheduled parents and their kids are not at all serving their own families. We'll talk more about being an optimistic and resilient role model and teaching children how to become more resilient and optimistic in an upcoming episode, because this is so important. Number four, lack of social support, such as family, friends, or even colleagues. Similar to the idea of lack of self-care, the lack of support from your family, friends, or coworkers makes life a little harder to bear. Someone once told me, in regards to your personal life, that friends are like pillars that hold you up during difficult times. When family and friends become drainers instead of pillars, The stress of life grows into a more serious state of being, leaving individuals alone to cope with chronic stress. And loneliness, as you know, is a big contributor to stress, depression, unhappiness, and a shorter life. Let me tell you a little bit about a misconception about finding joy and happiness in your life. The main myths or misconceptions about finding happiness and joy in your life is thinking someone else is going to fix me, or just listening and not doing the work to any motivational speaker or podcaster is going to fix me. Or kind of a mantra that people tend to repeat is that I'll be happy when, or that everyone else is the problem. Do you find yourself saying, quote, I'll be happy when, end of quote? If you are, it's time to take responsibility for your life. There are times and situations when difficult times arrive because of what the individual does in their lives. So if a person is blaming others, but what they're doing is being irresponsible, they're stuck in blaming others or unresolved anger, that's always a biggie, and constantly giving up and looking for the easy way out of their situations. You need to look at that. These unhappy and unproductive people avoid taking responsibility for their lives, actions, thoughts, and feelings. They resort to irresponsible behaviors. It's a bad habit. I call it irresponsible-itis. These types of individuals who fail in many areas of their life often blame other people, sometimes themselves, but they blame people as the sources of their problems and difficulties, which can include, parents, teachers, neighbors, friends, anyone else they can think of blaming. Another focus of blaming is on themselves. Blaming yourself is a biggie here. You can blame yourself for all sorts of possible faults, such as you're too old, too young, too tall, too short, too dumb, too uneducated, to make things manifest and become better in your life. At some point, people who lead resilient lives decide to cut loose from what I call these agony anchors, and that moves them ahead. At some point, you need to stop ruminating about things and move on. However, it can be a task that appears difficult to accomplish at first without guidance or help. I have found that some people hold on too long to events from their past. They cannot let that go. Aside from the idea of letting go, there are what I call agony anchors that I just introduced you. They keep you stuck. This position makes it difficult to learn and grow and move on from problems and life difficulties. Sorry about that. How to get rid of agony anchors that hold you back? Well, emotional anchors are like constantly listening to harsh recordings that play over and over in your mind and hurt your emotions and hurt your head. Many people habitually use these agony anchors to unconsciously not make improvements in their lives and to kind of reinforce that things happen to me and I can't get out of these. There are some common anchors in blaming, and I'm just going to give you a quick example of that because we did discuss that in an earlier episode. There are a couple types of anchors, blaming yourself and blaming others. So again, briefly, blaming others is that you blame everybody else for your problems. Teachers, students, parents, friends, colleagues, anybody else you can think of. When these people bothered you, it probably was appropriate to cringe. However, at some point in your life, you have to stop ruminating about it and move on. I remember talking with someone who said, I can't do anything great in my life because my parents were so mean to me. Are you going to carry that the rest of your life? You're an adult now. It's time to move on. Yes, work on making peace with it and releasing it. And all these podcast episodes will show you how to do that. Another one was blaming yourself. Another focus of blame is on yourself. You can blame yourself for all your possible faults, as we discussed a moment ago. Again, at some point, people lead resilient and optimistic lives that cut loose from these agony anchors and move ahead. Can one eventually reframe the consequences and turn it into a positive situation? So the question is, can you eventually reframe consequences, bad situations that you've experienced, and turn it into a positive situation or empower yourself to move on? And the answer is yes. You can do that once you start releasing these anchors that keep you stuck. So what can you do to get up or pick yourself up during or after difficult times? In my experience as a psychologist, therapist, researcher, and author for my books, I have found that there are a couple types of individuals who overcome and grow through difficult times. The types of individuals who overcome and grow through challenges are namely resilient and optimistic people. There are key behaviors that are crucial to bouncing back from difficulties. Even if you were not born that way, you can learn these patterns to lead more resilient, hopeful, and optimistic lives. These are individuals who leap out of hard times and difficulties, as I mentioned before. So here are patterns you can learn from resilient and hardy people who appear to bounce back from difficult times. Resilient people know how to handle problems in hard times. The traits of resilience means that you're better able to cope with difficulties, challenges, and unexpected events. It means you not only cope better, but you also find a way to resolve it. And resolving it and problem solving it, like optimists, is really key. Resilient people seem to naturally draw on past experiences and what they learned from them. They learn how to overcome their current situations by a reference point they have learned in the past. They have survived adversities in the past and lean on lessons that they learned to overcome problems. Hardiness is a process of adapting well in the face of problems, adversity, and ongoing stresses. According to the American Psychological Association, again, which I belong to as a psychologist, resilience involves rebounding from difficult times. Doing this can result in really profound growth for yourself as an individual. I know when I bounced back from difficult times in my life, it was something that empowered me and kept me moving on when obstacles came up in my quest to make my life amazing. While adverse events can be painful and difficult, they don't have to determine the rest of your life. People who are good at bouncing back understand there are many aspects of their lives they can control and change, such as their reactions to difficulties. Being more resilient not only helps you get through circumstances, but empowers you to grow and improve your life. Resilience involves certain behaviors and traits, as we talked about, but anybody can learn them. So let's move into what's important to understand. Here are ways you can become hardier and more resilient to get through difficulties in difficult times. These are only some ways that you can work with from my Bouncing Back from Difficult Times book. Some ways to get through difficulties is resilient people, they accept the situation. Resilient people tend to practice and accept a situation. They don't deny that there's a crisis, however, they accept the situation, facing them instead of fighting it and resisting it. They appear to understand and accept the reactions to it. They face the uncertainty and the feelings of uneasiness and worry. However, they don't get stuck there and start telling stories about that keeps them stuck further. They just know and understand the need to let go and move on. This was the biggest challenge during the pandemic and still continues in recent times. My advice to you is to let it go and move on. And that's what we're teaching you here today. Another trait and behaviors to accept need to make change. This is quite a challenge for some people. Resilient and optimistic people know that they can't always control all the events and circumstances surrounding them. Stuff happens, sometimes overwhelmingly so. However, they know they can choose to control how they react. They won't deny the situation and their feelings, but they know they need to move on and do something about it. They focus on the little aspects of the situation that are under their control, which makes them more able to weather almost any storm. From there, they'll go into the problem-solving mode to figure out what the options are and what steps they can take. I found that families who coped the best during lockdown, during the pandemic times and the following year, were those who practiced acceptance and moved on to problem solving the situation they were in. They became wonderful role models, not only for themselves, but for their friends and their family. And those kids of those kind of parents weathered that storm better than those who did not take this kind of approach. Another trait is just adaptability and flexibility, you can call it. Along with acceptance and knowing the need to take some type of action, hardy, resilient people are adaptable and flexible. They bend and will not let difficulties break them. They are flexible to make a shift or a change in the midst of problems and challenges. They display skills of adaptability and not inflexibility. So are you adaptable or are you inflexible? You can learn from them, and that is they deal with their reactions and they accept the situation challenging them. They acknowledge the need to make change in their position in a flexible and adaptive manner. And this can include changing their expectation and their plans in their lives. This was a biggie during the pandemic years and the following years, even now. People have had to face that they need to make different plans for their lives, whether it's any of these issues of not taking care of themselves, not having alone time, putting boundaries between work and themselves, but yet being responsible, perhaps even a career change. I know many people I've talked with, they used lockdown as an opportunity to cut cords with a job or situation they were not happy in. And many of them started their own businesses, and right now they're thriving. So let that be a role model and inspiration for you. And this kind of brings up what we've talked about a little bit before, is problem solving. Remember that rule? Pessimistic, upset people focus on complaining, where optimistic, happy people focus on solving their problems. It's really that simple. People who come to me for intensive coaching sessions, a patented approach that I developed, my co-author, Dr. Michael Mercer, they walk into my office usually complaining and groaning, and their posture is slouching, they're sounding down and using negative words and outlook on their life. Well, I let them talk so I can see exactly where they're at in their mindset in their life. But in a few minutes, I usually say something like, I know that situation is difficult for you. Have you thought about what your possible solution and answer is? And they typically say, I don't know. Then I ask them again, and they respond, I really don't know. Finally, I'll ask them a third time, and they slowly and more seriously say, Dr. Mary, I don't know. After that, I give them the rule of 3, which means they can only say, I don't know 3 times in one meeting. They usually look at me at first, shocked, and then they kind of crack a little smile, and they say, no one's ever told me that before. And they said, well, that makes sense. This immediately shocks them out of their habit, or shocks them out of their helpless IDK patterns. As a result, they start redirecting their energy and focus on solving a problem rather than just staying stuck in complaining and acting helpless about it. Suddenly, and I just see this, it's like suddenly there's a big shift, and problems and challenges become more approachable and solvable. So my advice to you, listen here. The next time you find yourself complaining, stop yourself in your tracks. Notice it and don't judge it. Just say to yourself, okay, what's my possible solution? Watch out for your IDK responses, I don't know. You start practicing this, and I suggest just practice this in the next week and see how many times you observe yourself complaining and how you can switch yourself so easily. Doing this puts you on a road to feeling more control on your life, as well as hardy, resistant, and optimistic. So you can focus on complaining, or you can focus on solutions. The choice is yours. You can focus on drawbacks, or you can focus on opportunities. You can feel uptight and tense, or you can feel confident that eventually you'll figure it out and figure out what to do. Another point I want to suggest here is that problems don't last forever. We touched upon it before, but those who cope and move on tell stories and tell themselves that the problem will pass, and they don't begin to tell a story that this will last forever. They focus on what they can do, the parts they can control, which is their reactions to the situation. So that's the key. How you react to problems. Are you going into drama? Or are you going into, okay, this is what's going on. I'm not happy with it. Let me figure out what I can do. Deep down inside, problems will pass, but take actions to figure out what you can do in the meantime. Learn from these resilient and optimistic habits. Resilient people bounce back from difficult time using these key elements that I just taught you. So, in the meantime, watch the stories that you develop about your problems, and don't get attached to the stories, because they are anchors and they do hold you back. Episode 13 dives into how you can change your story and change your life. So if you haven't listened to it, give it a listen to. But if not, these tips can really help you move on in easy ways. Remember the keys I just revealed to you. You can become hardier to get through difficult times. These are some ways you can bounce back from difficult times, like the title of my latest book. So lastly, these ways will stop you from worrying. All of these little steps I just revealed to you. Worry is that #1 happiness and energy zapper. The fastest way to fill yourself with joy and energy is to stop worrying. You probably say, okay, how can I do that, Dr. Mary? Well, you can do that by watching your thoughts. And every time you have a negative thought, just switch them into a positive or a more upbeat thought, such as a possible solution to your problems. Remember, people who focus on solutions are happier and they have more energy. Those who do not learn to solve their problems become even more stressed and eventually burn out. So worry, like other distractors, are obstacles between you and your happiness in your life. And this is the basis of happiness. So if you really want a permanent sense of happiness, this is what you must do, as I revealed in this podcast. Remember, you can only have one thought at a time in your mind. So what should that thought be? Dwell on what you want to accomplish, and do not dwell on what you don't want. This is one of the easiest ways to keep negative thoughts out of your mind. Listen now and remember, troubled times and disappointments can help you grow and learn if you welcome them into your awareness and your thoughts and learn from them. So difficult times teach us lessons, they guide us and help us learn valuable life lessons that can only be taught of us in that way or in that manner. So put into action what you learned so far. You've learned from my topic of resilience that gave you keys to dealing with difficulties in your lives, and as a result, you'll find it easier to make changes you desire and bounce back better in your life. So let me know how this lesson and what I'm teaching you today lands with you. Feel free to ask me any questions you may have about it. You can email me directly at Dr. Mercer, that's DrMercer, at positivelifeanswers.com. Please also feel free to email me your questions and comments using the Contact Us form from our website. So please go to positivelifeanswers.com so you can fill out that contact form and ask me your questions or any other questions that you might have. And you can also go to the online store there to get a copy of Spontaneous Optimism and Bouncing Back from Difficult Times. Those are two great books that go into much more detail than I can do right now on this podcast. So if you're stuck and need more help on this topic or anything else, you can contact me about my unique, patented, intensive coaching sessions. Please use the email I just gave you or the contact form from the website to get a hold of me regarding intensive coaching sessions and or request to speak at your organization or conference. We can meet in person or on Zoom. So let me know if you're ready to take a leap into your path, changing your life and improving your life. A note to my listeners, this podcast aims to provide useful information to my listeners. It's published with the understanding that your host, Dr. Mary Mercer, is not engaged in rendering professional services, counseling, or therapy through the contents and comments of this podcast. If you need individual service and if professional services is sought by the listener, such as counseling, psychotherapy, or medical advice, then the listener is responsible for seeking the services and advice of a competent professional or therapist. Contact your local psychological association or the American Psychological Association for a referral, or contact your primary care physician, your doctor, for local referrals. Thank you for listening and make it a fantastic week. I look forward to hearing from you and see you next time. Positively, Dr. Mary.